Hey guys, tonight we drift back over 4 millennia to the banks of the Nile, where the sun rises like a lazy cat stretching over the horizon, and the world's first alarm clocks quietly hum to life. You probably won't survive this morning without a snooze button, but somehow Egyptians managed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I promise I'll mentally wave to everyone from Cairo to Timbuktu. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along the sandy banks, the Nile's current whispering secrets of the past. Egyptians, unlike you today, couldn't just glance at a phone or ask Alexa what time it was. Time wasn't a digital number. It was a shifting rhythm. The flooding of the Nile, the crowing of roosters, the shadows stretching across temple walls. Daily life depended on this flow. Fields needed watering, priests needed chanting, and tomb builders needed to arrive before the sun melted their sandals. Historians still argue whether the first formal attempts to measure hours came purely from necessity or a divine urge to align with the cosmos. The first morning alarms were tied to the sunrise. Imagine a priest squinting through the dim light, waiting for a shadow to touch a carved line on a stone, and then, plop, a small bucket of water tipped over, startling him awake. Fringe theories suggest that some alarms involved small bronze bells, hidden within reed frameworks that clattered in a way that would make your modern alarm clock blush. The ingenuity wasn't just in making noise, it was in synchronizing human activity with celestial movements. You probably didn't know that Egyptians often coordinated their mornings with astronomical events. Certain temple walls were aligned so that a sliver of sunlight would hit a statue's eyes precisely at dawn, effectively a divine wake-up call. Imagine the thrill and panic if the sun didn't cooperate one day. Some experimental shadow clocks even tried to capture half-hour intervals, a level of precision that would make your smartwatch nod in grudging respect. As you trudge further, feeling the imagined heat and scent of papyrus and mud brick temples, think about the contrast. Today, an alarm is just a buzzing annoyance. Then, it was a carefully calibrated instrument, a bridge between human routine and cosmic order. These early experiments set the rhythm for labor, ritual, and life itself, proving that even thousands of years ago, humanity was obsessed with not being late, even if it meant water spilling on a sleepy priest.
The sun climbs higher, and with it, your curiosity. You walk deeper into the temple complex, where shadows carve perfect lines across smooth limestone floors. The Egyptians didn't invent the sundial just for curiosity. They needed to choreograph their world. From the moment light hit the walls of Heliopolis, time became something visible, something that could be tamed, measured, and argued over during long afternoons. You pause near a low stone pillar, etched with marks and faint hieroglyphs. It looks simple, a stick in the ground casting a shadow, but this was revolutionary. The earliest sundials, called shadow clocks, were carved slabs that measured how the sun's shadow moved throughout the day. Each mark meant a specific hour, though hour is a generous modern term. Their hours stretched or shrank depending on the season. Imagine your school or workday randomly changing length every few weeks. Chaotic, but also deeply human. Historians still argue whether these devices were meant purely for scheduling temple prayers or for something grander, an attempt to map divine order onto human life. Some say it was both. Egyptians believed that time itself was a godlike rhythm, and to track it was to participate in creation. You, standing there, might feel that rhythm vibrating faintly through the sandstone. A mainstream fact, Around 1500 BCE, the Egyptians had mastered a portable version of the shadow clock. It was compact enough to carry, basically an ancient wristwatch, if your wrist could hold a foot-long bar of stone. You could set it down, line it with the sun, and voila! Time told by a moving shadow. But here's a quirky tidbit. Because it relied on sunlight, the clock had to be flipped at midday, facing the opposite direction to measure afternoon hours. Picture a sleepy temple guard grumbling as he manually turns his clock around, muttering ancient Egyptian curses at Ra, the sun god, for being too bright. Of course, not everyone was convinced by this system. Some scholars point to alternate proto-sundials found in workers' villages near the Valley of the Kings, crudely drawn lines on limestone chips, likely used for timing breaks or lunch. Was that the ancient equivalent of sneaking a glance at your phone during work? Probably. The precision of these instruments, however, has been debated endlessly. The length of each hour varied from 45 to 75 minutes depending on the season. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians truly cared about absolute accuracy or simply about maintaining harmony with the sun's rhythm. To them, being in sync with Ra mattered more than being on the dot. One delightful fringe theory even claims that priests used polished bronze mirrors to reflect sunlight into inner chambers as a kind of early light alarm. When the sun hit the mirror at just the right angle, a beam shot across the hall and lit up a small shrine. Time to pray, time to wake, time to move. It's the most glamorous alarm clock imaginable, powered by divine geometry and a lot of sunshine. As the day stretches on, you start noticing how everything around you, markets, ceremonies, even gossip, seems synchronized by light and shadow. Time, once a vague flow, now has texture. The Egyptians were transforming nature into mechanism, light into order, chaos into calendar. The shadow clock wasn't just a device, it was a statement. We can command the sun. And as you step out from the cool temple shade, blinking into the blinding brightness of the desert, you realize, for the ancient Egyptians, the day itself was an alarm. Every sunrise a reminder to begin again.
By now, the afternoon sun has grown too fierce for shadows. You retreat toward the shaded courtyard, where the Egyptians built another masterpiece of time, one that didn't rely on light at all. Here, among the echoing halls and pools of still water, the world's first water clocks trickle quietly, marking time one drop at a time. The air is cool, damp, and full of soft ripples. You lean closer, watching the rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. It's hypnotic, like a primitive ASMR soundtrack from 1400 BCE. The Egyptian name for these devices was clepsydra, literally water thief. A perfect title, because that's exactly what they did. Steal moments out of eternity, cup by cup. Each clock was a stone bowl with markings inside. Water drained slowly through a small hole in the bottom, and as the level fell, priests read the time from the engraved lines. You could say this was the first liquid display. A mainstream fact, one of these clocks, discovered in the Temple of Karnak, dates back to around 1350 BCE, complete with 12 carefully carved divisions for nighttime hours, because even the gods needed a bedtime schedule. Standing there, you can almost hear the ancient equivalent of a ticking clock, the slow rhythm of water slipping through stone. Each drop was precious, each interval deliberate. Priests used these during night rituals when sundials slept. Historians still argue whether these timekeepers were reserved for temple ceremonies or also used by astronomers to track stars. Either way, someone had to refill them carefully, drop by drop, or risk throwing the entire schedule off. Imagine being the unlucky apprentice who overslept and let the clock run dry, an ancient version of forgetting to charge your phone. But the ingenuity didn't stop at simple bowls. Egyptian engineers experimented with more complex water systems, interconnected jars, rising floats, even rudimentary pressure controls. A quirky tidbit, some clocks were shaped like lotus flowers or baboons, symbolizing rebirth and vigilance. The baboon-shaped ones supposedly watched time pass. Imagine an alarm clock that stares at you while you sleep. Creepy, but efficient. You run your hand along the stone edge, and it's smoother than you'd expect, as though worn by centuries of careful use. The markings are shallow, yet precise, an early mathematics lesson carved in granite. Time was no longer just sunlight and shadow. Now it had texture, temperature, even sound. The water clock sang softly in the background of Egyptian civilization, a constant reminder that life was measured not just in breaths, but in droplets. And because the Egyptians were nothing if not ambitious, they began synchronizing these clocks with astronomical observations. At Karnak and Dendera, priests would compare the water's descent with the rising of Sirius, the star whose annual appearance heralded the Nile flood. When star and water matched, the heavens were in harmony. If not, well, someone probably blamed the intern. Some fringe historians believe these water clocks could even signal a sound at specific times. A sudden change in pressure might push air through reeds or pipes, essentially the earliest automatic alarm system. While there's little physical proof, the idea fits Egypt's flair for showmanship. After all, this was a culture that aligned entire pyramids with constellations just to impress the afterlife. And there's another layer to this watery rhythm: spirituality. To Egyptians, water symbolized creation, the primeval ocean from which life emerged. Measuring time through water wasn't just practical, it was poetic. Every drip echoed the birth of the world. You, sitting here tonight, might find that strangely comforting. Time, even as it slips away, nourishes everything it touches. So, the next time you wake up to the annoying buzz of your phone, think of a temple scribe in the dark, listening for the last drip of his clepsydra, whispering to himself, "Morning has come."
The night air settles heavy and cool over the temple roofs. The sun is gone, and only flickering oil lamps illuminate the hieroglyphs along the corridor walls. You can almost hear the low murmur of priests preparing for dawn rituals, moving like shadows among columns carved with gods and stars. Somewhere deep within this stone maze, an ancient alarm waits to sound, a clever contraption built to wake not just a person, but an entire temple. You follow the faint gurgle of water and the occasional metallic clink until you reach a small chamber. There, among bowls, tubes, and gears of bronze, sits what could be called the first mechanical alarm clock in history. No electricity, no gears like your watch, just gravity, water, and sound. Egyptians may not have had snooze buttons, but they understood the drama of an unexpected noise in the dark. The simplest type of alarm relied on the same clepsydra principle you saw earlier, but with a twist. Instead of letting water drip quietly into a basin, this device channeled it into a small cup balanced precariously on a rod. When the cup filled, it tipped, spilling water and striking a metal plate with a sharp clang. Imagine a Stone Age coffee machine that slapped you awake every sunrise. A mainstream historical fact, later Greek inventors credited this same principle to Egyptian prototypes. They simply refined it. The sound startled attendants awake to light incense, open gates, or begin chants before dawn. You can imagine the chaos the first few mornings. Priests leaping up mid-dream, sandals tangled, knocking over sacred oil lamps. Quirky, yes, but efficient. The pharaoh's rituals ran on time, and that was all that mattered. Some fringe theorists believe more elaborate sound devices existed, combining air pressure and reed pipes. As water flowed through narrow channels, it could push bursts of air through a reed, producing a short, flute-like note. Picture it, a temple chamber echoing with faint whistling tones at exact intervals. Was it a musical timekeeper, a cosmic reminder, or both? Historians still argue. But if true, it means the Egyptians didn't just invent alarms, they invented timed sound art, centuries before Bach ever tuned a harpsichord. Of course, these mechanical alarms weren't household items. They were sacred instruments. To the Egyptians, noise wasn't random. It carried divine meaning. Every sound had purpose, especially when linked to time. The clang of bronze meant the god Ra was returning. The hiss of escaping air echoed the breath of creation itself. You realize then that their alarm clock wasn't just waking humans, it was awakening the cosmos. Even the layout of temples reflected this rhythm. Priests had to rise before dawn to perform offerings precisely as the first sunlight entered the sanctuary. Missing that moment wasn't just lateness, it was a cosmic failure. So the alarms became sacred duty. Some inscriptions even record the phrase, "May the hour be pure." In a world before ticking watches, purity meant being perfectly in sync with divine time. You lean closer to the bronze plate, imagining the first clang it made thousands of years ago. That sound, ringing in a quiet temple, was both mundane and miraculous. It meant order. It meant the machinery of heaven and earth was running smoothly. And in that ancient dawn, as the priests stirred and the birds began their chorus, the first alarm clock of the world had done its job. You smile. Even back then, someone probably muttered, 5 more minutes.
Morning seeps slowly into the horizon, painting the Nile in streaks of rose and bronze. You stand at the edge of the city now, where farmers, fishermen, and priests all awaken to the same rhythm, the rhythm that Egypt's early timekeepers set in motion. The world is stirring. A rooster crows. The distant hum of temple drums carries over the breeze. Time, once the property of the gods, has become the heartbeat of daily life. You pass through a small village where reed huts lean toward the sun. Here, life is simpler, but still tethered to ritual. Farmers know when to irrigate, not by guesswork, but by watching the first light strike temple obelisks. Bakers rise when the water clock in the local shrine signals the first hour, and the scent of rising bread drifts through the dusty streets. It's as though the entire community hums to one grand metronome, a civilization synchronized by sun, shadow, and drip. A mainstream historical fact. Timekeeping wasn't only about science in Egypt. It was about religion and civic unity. The priests used these clocks to time prayers and offerings, but so did administrators to schedule labor shifts on the pyramids and astronomers to forecast the Nile floods. Even major festivals like the Feast of Opet were precisely calculated using these instruments. Missing the right celestial alignment could mean missing the gods entirely, a divine scheduling error no one wanted on their record. You can picture Thebes on festival morning. Banners of dyed linen fluttering, crowds gathering along temple avenues, and priests adjusting their clepsydra to match the rising of Sirius. The alignment was everything. Once that first drip matched the glint of a star, the horn sounded and processions began. To an outsider, it might look like chaos, a swirl of dancers, animals, drums, but to Egyptians, every movement was timed, deliberate, holy. The alarm had sounded for the whole city. Still, historians argue whether these public time rituals were meant more for spectacle than accuracy. Some believe the great ceremonies were symbolically timed, their clocks merely suggestive tools, not strict regulators. Others argue that the Egyptians achieved remarkable precision, using both water and shadow instruments in tandem. Maybe both are true. Maybe their genius lay not in perfect accuracy, but in creating a sense of harmony between people, gods, and nature. A quirky tidbit. Some temples reportedly had designated time announcers, priests whose sole duty was to call out the passing hours. Imagine a man in linen robes wandering through corridors at night, whispering, "The third hour of the night has begun." In a way, they were ancient human alarm clocks. You could fall asleep comforted by the steady voice of someone whose entire existence revolved around keeping you on time. The more you listen, the more this ancient world feels eerily familiar. Time ruled them as it rules us. There were mornings of oversleeping, afternoons that dragged, and nights that vanished too quickly. Their clocks, whether of water or shadow, did more than measure. They reminded people that life was fleeting, slipping drop by drop, shadow by shadow. And as you walk back toward the river, the hum of ancient Egypt still echoes through your mind. It's strange how something so old feels so modern. Their alarms weren't just about waking up. They were about awakening the world, about ensuring the Nile flowed, the sun rose, the fields thrived, and the heavens stayed in balance. To live in rhythm with the cosmos was to be truly awake. You pause by the water's edge. Somewhere behind you, a temple gong rings softly, marking the new hour. Time moves forward again, and so do you. Now, let's slow everything down. The morning sun fades from gold to pale cream. The water settles, the birds quiet, and the ripples on the Nile smooth into glass. You take a long breath, feeling that ancient rhythm ease into your pulse, steady, slow, calm. The Egyptians may have invented alarm clocks to wake their world, but right now, their legacy is helping you drift in the opposite direction, into stillness. Imagine lying on a cool stone floor inside a temple, the air scented with old incense and lotus oil. Somewhere far away, a single drop of water falls into a basin, soft, measured, perfect. That was the sound that marked the hours for thousands of years, and tonight, it marks your slow descent into rest. The walls around you fade into shadows. The hieroglyphs blur into gentle shapes. The same stars that guided ancient astronomers glitter above your own roof, unchanged, patient. Time stretches, bends, and softens until it's no longer something to chase. It's just something to float within. Maybe, as you breathe a little deeper, you realize that timekeeping was never about control. It was about connection between day and night, human and divine, waking and sleep. And in that soft realization, you finally release your hold on the ticking world. The last sound is a drip of water, then silence.